Fonts have the ability to communicate in more ways than just words. In fact, the best design work out there utilizes the visual qualities of fonts to help convey and connect with their audience. Hi, I'm Daisy Ein from Envato Tuts Plus, and I'm an illustrator, designer, and developer. In this video, we'll discuss the psychology of fonts, or fonts that evoke emotion. We'll take a look at some examples and discuss how they might visually communicate. Before we dig in, if you love fonts, make sure to check out Envato Elements. There are thousands of fonts in the Envato Elements library, and they're all included for one low price. You also get design templates, stock photos, brushes, and lots more. It's all included, and it's just an amazing resource to have in your toolkit. You can download the fonts featured in this video down in the link in the video description, so make sure to check that out. I'd also recommend checking out the written version of this tutorial by fellow Tuts Plus author Grace. She has awesome insights on the subject too, so please check it out. So what do we mean when we say the psychology of fonts? Well, imagery is not just plain old imagery. We interpret it. Let's check out a really basic example. Here we have a red heart shape. What does this visually communicate to you? If we change this around to a blue heart, is the meaning any different for you? Your answer likely depends on things like your background, your experiences, and your perspective. That's why it's so valuable for designers to know their target audience. Then, if you can play into those preconceived ideas, you can better communicate with that audience. Or, for example, humans tend to anthropomorphize things that we see, like applying human characteristics to non-human things. In many ways, humans can be more engaged with visual content than textual content. So looking at fonts, how the font looks matters a lot. Let's check out an example. Let's say these two examples are both logo type for a bank. Which one looks trustworthy to you? Likely, you'd pick the one on the left because the one on the right looks too informal. This matters because we'd want the business handling our finances to be trustworthy and responsible, not playful or whimsical. While there are a lot of factors here we could experiment with, like color and proximity, the font itself does play a substantial role in how this example communicates. So let's explore this idea with 6 different types of fonts. Serif fonts. Serif fonts have these little brackets on their ends. Those are called serifs. And serif fonts tend to be associated with keywords like stability, tradition, intellect, and formality. For a long time, the quote, default font in a lot of software was Times New Roman, a serif font. Historically, serifs had a large presence in print as well. Organizations like universities, financial institutions, law firms, all often take advantage of the look and feel of serif fonts. These organizations want to convey that kind of idea, that they have history, that they have stability. Luxury brands often draw on serif fonts too, because they can look really classy and high-end as well. Slab serif fonts. Slab serif fonts also have serifs, but notice that these serifs are chunky and block-like. It significantly impacts the aesthetic, doesn't it? Slab serifs tend to be associated with keywords like enduring, strong, and powerful. Perhaps this is in part due to the heaviness that this type of font often has. You can, of course, have lighter slab serifs, but the traditional aesthetic that comes to mind is this sort of chunky look. So unlike traditional serifs, slabs don't have that same somewhat delicate look. Organizations like car companies often work with slab serifs because, again, they kind of have that brash and powerful vibe. It could also work really well for outdoorsy projects or something that has to do with camping. Sansserif fonts. Sansserif fonts don't have serifs at all, and there's many different classifications of sans-serif font too. We'll just take a general look at this type of font. They tend to be associated with keywords like progressive, informal, open, and even friendly. Personally, I think some sans-serif fonts even have a degree of neutrality to them, which can make them a really versatile choice when you're working on a design. If you look at branding like Facebook, Apple, or Spotify, you'll see sans-serif fonts. They're a clean choice, and they often have an association with things like tech or other industries that thrive on new features and innovation. Modern sans-serif fonts. Like I mentioned, there's many different classifications of sans-serif fonts. Let's take a look at some of the more modernist styles, fonts with some geometric inspiration, whether it be directly or strictly geometric, or a little more loosely associated. You might see fonts like this associated with things like luxury and elegance. For example, fragrances, fashion, and high-end products might lean towards this type of font. Interestingly, if we take these types of fonts and round them off, it really changes how they communicate. Notice how a rounded sans serif suddenly becomes a lot more informal, maybe even more appropriate for a younger audience. Script fonts. Scripts are another broad category with a lot of personality. Think about handwriting, it can really vary. Script fonts can be quite romantic, formal, and luxurious, like this example. You might associate this with a type of high-end restaurant or a luxury brand. Then this font, on the other hand, has a much more informal, friendly look and feel. Imagine this on a birthday card or used in a children's clothing brand. Script fonts can be quite eclectic, so when you're looking at this type of font, it's really important to think about how the strokes visually communicate. Long, flowing strokes that visually draw inspiration from calligraphy are going to feel classy and elegant. In contrast, chunky, informal writing is going to have a very different vibe. Display fonts. So if you thought scripts were quite diverse, check out display fonts. This is a very broad category, but in most cases, display fonts tend to have some kind of visual characteristic that makes it visually most appropriate for display type, not something like body copy that you'd see in a paragraph. They might blend heavy imagery into the letter forms or do something visually graphic. That makes these fonts a great choice for points of emphasis. They're not immune from visual communication. In fact, that's kind of the point. This font, for example, has really stylized serifs, giving it an old-time Western movie feel. Then this font is a sans serif with a bit of script mixed in to create a fun, informal feel. So looking at all these fonts, one of the most important things to remember is fonts communicate beyond what they spell out. The line, shape, color, proximity, all these visual attributes communicate to your viewer when you're designing with type. And while it's really important to consider all of those aspects, the font itself and its design is a huge consideration. You can use these ideas that fonts are inherently communicative to arm yourself to better communicate with your audience. So if you enjoyed this discussion on fonts, how they communicate, and some of the ideas behind these concepts, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to our channel. You can also click on the notification bell so you never miss an update. I'm Daisy Ein, thanks so much for watching, and happy designing.